Good afternoon, folks. Thanks very much for rocking up to our session. I'm Shane, not Jane, and I'm the CEO of PebblePad. Normally, I travel around the globe talking to universities, which are our primary customers, and PebblePad's used by some of the best universities in the world. And we've no idea yet whether it's of any use to the corporate market. But some of the things that have been happening in universities is a sort of shift away from content driving all the learning. Because what was happening were people, graduates were leaving universities knowing lots of stuff, but not necessarily able to apply the stuff they knew. And not knowing how to unlearn the stuff they'd learned and relearn the new stuff because the world is shifting so quickly. Not long ago we met Jane. And Jane's written a book called Modern Workplace Learning, and it just so happened that the things that Jane was writing about changes in professional learning, chimed with what we were experiencing in higher education. And so we invited Jane to come and talk on our behalf, because frankly, we don't want to be hearing from a vendor. So I'm going to stop talking in a moment, hand over to Jane, and she's going to share with you some of her ideas and thoughts around how learning in the workplace is shifting as well. Before I step away, I've got a couple of things. I just wanted to quickly show you our platform, mainly because we've had to give away our firstborn child and an awful lot of money to have a stand here, so it seemed we should show you something at least. Our template is a personal learning space where people make sense of their experiences and are able to share those with others. It looks a bit like that. If you want to find out more, you can come across to our stand, which is right there. And at the end of the presentation, if the ideas that you hear are of interest to you, we'll be giving away some copies of Jane's fantastic book. So that's that book. That's it from me. Over to Jane, and I'll be back at the end. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thanks, Shane, and thank you for inviting me here today. What I'm going to briefly talk about in the 25 minutes that I've got here is I wanted to start by just setting the scene. A lot of this you're probably very familiar with, the fact that the world is changing and learner habits are changing, but I just want to go through that again so that we're all coming from the same position. And then I want to talk briefly about what this means for learning and development, and I've seen happening around the world with the organizations I'm working with. And this also, what it also means in terms of learning technologies. And then of course that means how PebblePad fits into it all. And then right at the end, well, I'm going to show you how you can get hold of a copy of this. So you have to sit through the whole presentation before you get the book, I'm afraid. Anyway, let's get started. So I think you're pretty aware there's been an awful lot of talk about the way the workplace is changing, and that, in the last 10 years it's changed in pretty amazing ways. There's talk about the emerging gig economy and how there's no longer going to be such a thing as a job for life. And then, of course, how digitization is affecting people's jobs and everything that's happening in the workplace. And I think this quote from Microsoft was really quite important, because it's this growth of connectivity and devices. It is making profound changes. But the last bit's the key thing here. Companies need to rethink everything from culture to tools and environments. And there's this rethinking piece that I want to focus on today. Clearly, the world's moving very fast. Learning development, I know, are finding it hard to keep up with the pace of change. They need to now think about this contingent workforce, people coming in and out. And what I'm seeing now is that the thoughts that we need to move to a culture where individuals take much more responsibility for driving their own continuous development. Employees who think about the skills they need to have now as well as in the future. And for many forward-looking organizations that I'm working with, continuous learning lies at the whole center of their culture. And the main skill that many of them are now looking for, is learnability. That's defined, well, I define it as the design ability to constantly learn new things. And I'm seeing now organizations recruit for learnability, people who are learning animals, as Google puts it, people who constantly want to learn. And my own research through the things like the top 100 tools shows me that people with high learnability, already their learning habits are changing in quite significant ways. And the most important thing for individuals nowadays, of course, they're not relying solely on company training. They're not seeing that as the only way that they learn anymore. They might take courses externally for themselves. They choose to do that. That is an important part. But they're also recognizing that they're learning from their daily work experiences through just interacting with their colleagues and their customers and their clients, through interactions with their teams where they're sharing experiences, as well as with their manager who might be giving them feedback and guidance, perhaps even another coach or mentor who's providing them with this external support as well. But that's not all the ways they're learning. As I'm sure you know, and many of the presentations are talking about, people are learning from a lot that's going on outside in their professional networks, where they're interacting with people on a regular basis, like Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth, or perhaps in more confined communities and groups online, where they're working with people like-minded who have specific similar interests. But they're also, learning from professional events like this, exhibitions and conferences where they might come face to face, or they might be listening in the back channel of the conference and tapping into what's going on. They're not there in person. They're also perhaps having a continuous daily drip feed of knowledge through the blog posts that they're reading and the articles they're getting down in their news feeds. So they're learning in many different ways, and I've actually been calling this modern professional learning because it really is a new way many people are learning, and it happens both inside and outside the organization. And interestingly enough, it's partly organized by L&D, so it's not totally organized by L&D now. It's partly organized by a manager, but it's also self-organized and partly self-organized. Learning in this context is therefore both planned and unplanned. A conscious experience, people know they're going to learn something, or maybe even a subconscious experience is something they learn, they didn't realize they were learning at the time. So I think this whole way people are learning means we need to rethink the way learning development can support these activities. And I see that it's no longer just going to be about providing training. Okay, yes, training is always going to be a key part of it, and particularly providing sort of modern training that's more in line with the way people are learning for themselves outside on the web. But there's also going to be much more important aspects of the role in terms of supporting manager-led learning, helping the managers work with develop their people, helping an individual get the most out of their daily work, to learn from their experiences at work, to help teams share their experiences with one another, so those learning gems, if you like, are not lost, but people can learn from one another in the context and in the workplace, not in some extra special activity. And also there's a big role now in terms of empowering what I call employee-led learning. And by that I mean helping to nurture this learnability, perhaps in those who don't already have these inquisitive skills, and helping them to set their own professional goals, helping them to identify the right resources, content, people, activities that are going to be able to help them achieve those roles, and also help them record and reflect on all their experiences. And for this new way of learning, then I call this modern workplace learning. And for me, it's very much about doing things differently, doing the same things but differently, but doing many other things. And in fact, that's what this whole book is all about, the practicalities of what that means in just general terms, and ideas to actually start to put this into practice, to broaden the role from just focusing on training, delivering, managing, training, but thinking about supporting manager-led learning and empowering employee-led learning. But of course, this conference is about technologies, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. And I think you'd probably agree with me that most of the technologies you're seeing around in this space down here fall into this bottom area here, providing modern training. And for many people, the learning management system has always been the central prime technology for organizing and managing training. And it will continue to be so, but I don't believe this centrally controlled system is going to be appropriate for supporting learning in all these ways in the future. I don't think it's going to be practicable or even feasible to try and get people to put everything into the learning management system and try and control and manage everybody's learning. They're coming from so many sources. Learning is partly subconscious, as we can see, so really it's just an almost impossible task. I think we need to rethink the whole way we think about supporting learning in the modern workplace. And I think the answer to that is one where an individual starts to manage or organize his or her own learning, starts to bring it together and organize it. And then the success of their learning will then come in terms of managers looking at performance improvements and changes rather than just looking at activity. You know, have they been on a course? Have they completed an online course? Have they posted something in a enterprise social network? The activity itself is not important. It's the new performance that takes place. And ideally, it's only the manager that can really see that through, supported by learning and development. And this is a course where PebblePad fits in, because PebblePad provides the individual with a personal learning space. And the very important part of it about this is it's a privately controlled space. So the individual is responsible for what goes on in that space. And what we're seeing is that people are doing this, if you like, for themselves in many ways, using lots of different tools, but this is a way to bring everything together. And one of the key parts of PebblePad, as Shane alluded to, is the fact that it has some inbuilt templates. So it's not just like an empty space, it's got some real support in it to help people to do just that. So, for instance, it's got a smart template to help you identify your goals for the future and record them in the space. And it's also got a structured reflection template, which means that there's already got little boxes for you to fill in to help you just on the fly, on the go, to record your experiences. And this structured approach means, therefore, that individuals don't have to spend time on thinking about what am I going to write and to record this. They've got guidance to think about recording things in a more structured way. And I think really that is very important, that coherent reflection is given them in the forms of a template. Now, there's just two. There are many, many other templates that are available for different contexts. But one of the key things about these templates is that they can be easily used through some sort of mobile device. So you have your desktop with your store of all your assets, but you've got your mobile device, which is called Pebble Pocket. What that means is that you could be sitting here in the audience listening to me with your template open, recording my thoughts and ideas, and then simply send it back to your store later on, or as soon as you finished it, completed it. It also lets you take photos and videos, so you can record things in many, many different ways. But the great thing is it brings it all back to your central store where you control it and where it's just for you at that stage, because everything you create is by default private to you. But if you wish, you can then share it with others. You're not obliged to. But say you want to share something with one of the people in your professional networks on Twitter, you could do that. You could send it to them. Say you want to share something with your manager, you could do it with them. Say you want to share something on your enterprise social network, you could do it. It's up to you. And even more than that, you can ask people for feedback if you want. Or it could just be a one-way exercise, or you could ask for comments. It's all under your individual control, which for me is really the most powerful thing that I've seen. So that's really the hub of the personal tool. If you haven't had a demo, you can see there's much more to it than that. But the key thing is a privately controlled space, structured templates to support learning and reflection, and sharing as you wish. Now, you can sign up for a trial edition for yourself, just to try it out, see if it works for you. And I know there's lots of people who already do that, but there's the next stage of course, is to think about a more organizational implementation. And by that, I mean, not forcing everybody to sit there and have to do it, but one where you're supporting activities and learning, personal learning in a more organized fashion. And with that in mind, there are a number of other parts of the PebblePad's product suite. There's something called Atlas, which essentially provides workspaces, and these could be used by perhaps managers to send stuff down to their people, or learning development, for instance, for onboarding or anything like that, to send it down. And of course, individuals can then upload stuff into their workspace, perhaps to have something more formally assessed, for review, peer review, for performance management, for professional accreditation. There are lots of reasons why you might want to have this space where people can pass things backwards and forwards. So the PebblePad functionality then is more than just the individual's personal learning space, and out of all these other things will be lots of other technologies. So it's not going to replace all the other tools. It's a way to bring everything together that the individual has total control over, and that can then be used, passed back to the organization if required. There's another one up there, Flourish. That's a little space that supports mentoring and coaching and allows interaction between the coach and the coachee, if that's the right word. And for me, I think this is really important because it brings it's a number of advantages of using this kind of technology. It means you can have a completely new organizational framework, which is one fit for the modern workplace. And there are a number of three things I want to leave you with, and I've written them down just so that you can see them in writing here. The first one, as I think I keep reiterating, is it puts an individual's personal learning system at the heart of workplace learning. And as we always know, the individual, the employee, is at the heart of learning all the time. Secondly, it ensures that learning happens, or learning is integrated from beyond the workplace. So it's not just about training. It's not even just about what I did at work today and what I learned from my work today. It's about how everything I'm doing in my life can become part of my store. And thirdly, it moves this focus away from trying to track activity, learning activity, which is pretty meaningless in its own right, to moves it away to thinking about how managers can track performance changes. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Seeing how people are improving or acquiring new skills. So for me, I think it's a pretty game-changing product. And I tell you, I don't say that very often or very lightly. And one of the reasons I think it's game-changing is because it's a win-win for everybody. Now, for the individual, it's actually really important because this personal learning space is portable. So you can pretty much take it and plug it into another PebblePad installation, if it is one in the organization, but you just take it around with you, and as jobs move around, that's what people are going to want, their own learning. Otherwise it's just captured in some organizational system and they lose everything that they've done. So if it starts in the universities where it's becoming established, then they take their space, plug it into the next organization, and then plug it into another organization as they move on. So they can profit from it and to build on their professional development, not have to start all over again when they go to another organization. They can begin to build it up and move and use their experiences from their organization. And for the organization, you're saying, what's in it for them? What's in it for them is that when somebody plugs in their system, they're bringing their whole wealth of experience and professional skills and development they've built up over many, many years into the organization. It's there now, available to be shared if and when the individual wants to. So I think it's something we need to be thinking about, this flipping the whole way we're thinking about organizational learning technologies. And now, finally, I should say that PebblePad is not a new technology. It's been around for a while. It's been around for about 12 years now, and it's being used in some of the world's finest universities. Well, they realize the world is changing, and they need to be changing with it as well. And now I know Shane's got organizational clients too, who now realize that this is the same for them, and they realize that this is the new technologies that they're going to need for support learning in the modern workplace. And just sort of like to say that working with Shane and his team, they're experienced learning professionals. They've been in business for a long time. So when you talk to them, you're going to get a real depth of experience there, not just buzzword speak that you might hear in some other places. So I do recommend you go and have a look at it. And if you do, if you ask some questions, have a look at it. We've got a few copies of the book to give away, and if you like, I'll sign them for you. But just going to stop there because I'm sure you might have some questions, and I'm going to invite Shane back to answer any, because I'm sure some of them are very, very specific PebblePad.
Or not. Does anybody have any questions that we might be able to hear?
No?
Did that resonate with any? I mean, it doesn't have to. We don't know whether this is fit for your kind of organisations. This is a bit of a kind of experiment for us. As Jane says, we work with lots of universities, and this seems to work for them. And I should say, by the way, it's not necessarily replacing other technology. So we integrate really well with OneDrive, Google Docs, badges. I don't know if you're using badges in your organisations. It talks to the LMS. It has a great API, uses LTI and all that sort of stuff, because we're not the only tool that you need in a complex organisation. I think the important thing is, though, is making, as Jane really, I mean, better than any of my team could have done actually, talked about how important this is for modern professional learners to make sense of their own diverse experiences. Because actually, managing the local children's football club could give me really valuable skills that I can bring to my performance review and talk to my manager about, maybe as part of leadership courses I'm doing. That's what our thinking has been ever since we first started. So, no questions still?
I think one thing I'll just add, and I think it's coming out of a post that Colin you wrote, is that it's not about lifelong learning, which is something we're hearing about. It's life-wide learning, and that's a term that I think we really should be talking about much more, because it's about the breadth. Everything that we do is relevant to what we do at work. We shouldn't compartmentalize it. We bring it in, as you say, from the sports work. You might not think that's relevant, but it's giving you good skills, leadership skills, and so forth. So we're going to see how we can bring all this stuff in, and currently there's no real systems that can do this kind of stuff. So I do once again recommend you go and have a look.
So thank you very much for your time. Jane, thank you for doing a fabulous presentation on our behalf.